Morning, all. All right, so I went back and forth on it, but you can see I'm wearing a Florida jersey, so sure, I'll take Florida in this series. This should be a really fun Stanley Cup final this year. We have two teams that have never won the Stanley Cup in their history, so we will have a team holding up the Stanley Cup this year who has never done it before. Of course, for Florida, it's been a bit of a longer wait. Now, these teams took a bit of a different route to get here as well. Florida went 12-4 to get to this point, and Vegas went 12-5. It could have been 12-3 if they'd swept Dallas. We would have got the Stanley Cup final starting on Wednesday, but instead it starts this Saturday. So for Florida, the way they get here is they were down 3-1 against Boston. They lost the first game at Boston 3-1. Then they lost both games at home, 4-2 and 6-2 before the comeback began. They won in overtime in games 5 and game 7, both of those at Boston, 4-3 the score in both, and that was around a 7-5 win for Florida at home against Boston in game 6. Then they went to Toronto. They won both games. They came home and won the third game before losing the fourth game 2-1, and then went to Toronto and won in overtime 3-2. In overtime, they were very good against Carolina as well. That 4 overtime game in Carolina, 3-2 win there, 2-1 overtime win the next game, and then they came home and they won 1-0 and 4-3. So while people are talking about how much time off they've had, they also had the 4 overtime game in there and they still had the sweep. So Florida has already shown that they're pretty darn good at being consistent in these playoffs and playing under any conditions and still finding ways to win. On the Vegas side, they started their playoffs with a loss as well. So that's an interesting little tidbit that both of these teams lost their first game of the playoffs. And it was a 5-1 win at home against Winnipeg, or 5-1 loss, I should say, at home against Winnipeg that started their playoffs before they won the next 4. They won in Winnipeg in a double overtime game that made that series 2-1 in their favor, and they didn't look back from there. Then against Edmonton, they lost games 2 and 4 in that series. Both of them kind of lopsided, 5-1 at home in game 2, and then 4-1 in Edmonton in game 4 before winning games 5 and 6, both of those in regulation. Then they move on to Dallas. They won both games at home in overtime, 4-3 and 3-2 respectively. Go to Dallas and win 4-0 in that disastrous game for the Stars that was great for Vegas. And then they lost game 4 at Dallas 3-2 in overtime. Dallas's lone overtime win in these playoffs. Then they lost at home against Dallas 4-2 before, of course, last night winning 6-0 against the Dallas Stars and putting them out of the playoffs. So Vegas has played one more game than has Florida. They've been 12-5 in these playoffs. Both of these teams in pretty good shape. The one difference being that Florida has had that experience of, fighting for their lives against Boston. They won 3 in a row there. They haven't had that experience since. And of course, for Vegas, they have not been in a position where they've had to play a game where they could be the team that gets eliminated. And we'll see how things go in this series because one is going to eliminate the other. And so I figured I might as well wear Florida because why not? I didn't wear Florida for any of the 3 previous rounds. If I wear Vegas, then immediately the comment section becomes, we'll see, he hates Florida. But now this way, I guess I hate Vegas. I don't know. The comment section will tell me how I feel. So if we look at these teams and how they've played period by period, quite a different story between these two teams when it comes to scoring. Vegas scores 20 in the first period. They've allowed 21. Florida, 10-10. So not a lot of scoring in the Florida games in first periods. Second period, well, Vegas owns there, 24-8 so far in these playoffs in the second period. Whereas for Florida, they're winning, but only 18-15. And then if we look at the third period, Florida is allowing has allowed 18 in the third period. They've scored 16, and on the Vegas side, they've allowed and scored the same amount with 15 each. Now, overtime is where Florida shines. They've won 6 games in overtime. On the Vegas side, they're 3-1 in overtime. Special teams would seem to favor Florida, and I say would seem because there wasn't a ton of power play time in that Vegas-Dallas series, for instance. There wasn't a ton of power play time in the Carolina-Florida series either. As these series move along, we see fewer and fewer calls being made, and we can have the debate about whether or not they're calling things, whether or not the game's getting cleaner. but either way, we don't see as many calls. So the power play and the penalty kill don't feel nearly as important by the time you reach the final as they do in round one. But Florida, 27.9% on the power play, 71.2% on the penalty kill. Vegas, 18.5% on the power play, their penalty kill at 63%. There should be an asterisk there, though, because Edmonton really trashed that penalty kill ranking. Their hits per 60 minutes, for Florida, 32.09. For Vegas, 31.49. Those are two of the higher numbers in these playoffs. And block shots for every 60 minutes, 15.52 for Florida, 18.69 for Vegas. So Vegas a little bit busier when it comes to the shot blocking. Small edge in hits to Florida over Vegas. But when we look at leading after one, well, that's where things get interesting too. Both teams are 6-0 if they lead after the first period. So the first period is very important in this series. And if they're trailing after two, Florida's 0-4 in these playoffs, whereas Vegas is 1-3 if they're trailing after the second period. Now, if we're going to talk about the fastest team to win a Stanley Cup as an expansion team, the Philadelphia Flyers currently are the fastest. It took them 7 seasons. We are, of course, in season 6 for Vegas. Vegas would then become the fastest team to win a Stanley Cup as an expansion team. For Florida, it's been longer than 7 seasons. We know this. The Islanders took 8 seasons. The Lightning took 12 seasons. And technically, the Oilers, it was their 5th season, but they weren't a true expansion team, right? They came in from the WHA pretty much fully formed and not really a true expansion team there. Now, if we look at the matchups this season and the regular season, do they matter? Probably not, but it's worth talking about. Both teams won at home. Vegas won at home 4-2 on January the 12th. On March the 7th, Florida won at home 2-1. So not really like high-scoring, crazy games, but the home team wins both of those. And if you're wondering about scheduling for the Stanley Cup Final, all 7 games are listed as starting at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. And also, there's extra rest days a lot. Between games 5 and 6, between games 6 and 7, between, I think it's games 2 and 3 as well. So if it goes 7 games, the series will span from June the 3rd to June the 16th. I don't know that this goes 7 because these teams have definitely relied on momentum. Florida, a ton of momentum to get here. Long winning streak along the way. And for Vegas, they've had their share of winning streaks as well. So whoever wins game 1 may end up winning this, but we'll see, right? So on the Florida side, Bobrovsky, .935 save percentage. He's in the conversation for the Conn Smythe if they win it. I would give him the Conn Smythe ahead of Tkachuk because Tkachuk didn't have goals against the Toronto Maple Leafs and Bobrovsky was fantastic. On the Vegas side, Adin Hill's become quite the story. Bit of a shaky game 5 against Dallas, yes, but last night he didn't allow a single goal. He wasn't tested that much, but still not a single goal against. That's pretty good. Now on the scoring front, Tkachuk is the leading scorer of these two teams. He has got the most points. 16 games, 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points. But on the other side, you've got Eichel. And this is a really interesting storyline. So Tkachuk, of course, drafted by the Calgary Flames. The Flames couldn't get over the hump. He goes to Florida. His first year in Florida, he could win a Stanley Cup. Eichel was drafted by Buffalo. Buffalo can't even make the playoffs. A lot of fingers were pointed towards Eichel. Now he could win a Stanley Cup and potentially himself get a Conn Smythe trophy. Then you've got Verhaeghe, who was let go by the Tampa Bay Lightning. You've got Marchessault, who was let go by the Florida Panthers. So there's a storyline here, right? Verhaeghe, 16 games, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. Marchessault, 17 games, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points. Barkov, 16 games, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points, has been fantastic when he's played. And even hurt, he's been very good. And I think the rest between the conference final and the final means that Barkov should be 100%. Barbashev has been quite the addition for Vegas. In 17 games, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. You can't overstate just how important Barbashev's been to this run. Sam Reinhart, another player who played in Buffalo. One of the Buffalo cast-offs is going to end up winning a Stanley Cup. Either Sam Reinhart or Jack Eichel. Now, Reinhart hasn't put up the same amount of points, but he has more goals. In 16 games, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points. And then on the other side, you got Mark Stone. In 17 games, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. The captain, of course, of the Vegas Golden Knights. And he's been strong as a two-way forward in these playoffs. He might be two-handed. I don't know. We haven't had that stick yet. That's straight blade. Anyway, doesn't matter. So Bennett, 15 games, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. Sam Bennett, also from the Calgary Flames organization. So that's 2 Calgary Flames right there. William Karlsson, 17 games, 10 goals, 4 assists, 14 points. He's an original misfit for the Golden Knights. This is his second trip to the final in Vegas. Montour had a bit of a tough time offensively last round. Not that he's going to carry us in the final. 16 games, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points. Chandler Stevenson has been quite the find out of Washington. 17 games, 8 goals, 6 assists, 14 points for him with Vegas. Then you've got Duclair. Duclair has been very prominent for Florida. The numbers don't show, I think, how well he's played. In 15 games, he just has 3 goals. He's due for a couple more. 6 assists, 9 points overall. And then you got Riley Smith. 17 games, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points for him. Strong veteran presence for the Vegas Golden Knights. Duclair is followed by Lindell, who in 16 games has 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points. Lindell, very good defensive forward, of course. And then you've got Pietrangelo, 16 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points for him. Pietrangelo, really strong run. He had a Stanley Cup ring for himself in St. Louis. He's looking to add another one. Nick Cousins, 16 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. He's had 2 goals, both of them very key for Florida. And on the other side, you've got Roy. Nick Roy has been very good. 17 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. Moving Roy to the wing was a really smart move by Bruce Cassidy, and it has given him a different look to his game, and it means if somebody gets thrown out of the faceoff circle, you can put Nick Roy in there as well. I've always said you can't have too many centers. And then Forsling rounds out your top 10 for Florida. 16 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points for him as well. He's a workhorse on the blue line. And Amadio, who has been an underrated player for Vegas for some time. In 11 games, he has 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. So solid production, solid depth. Both of these teams getting a lot of depth scoring. And if you're looking at who's driven it, Tkachuk, 4 game-winning goals for him. Verhaeghe, 3 game-winning goals for him. So out of 12 wins, 7 of those game-winning goals have come from those 2 players. And on the other side, you have Marchessault, you have Stevenson, both players, 3 game-winning goals. So combined, they have had half the game winners for the Vegas Golden Knights. You can make the argument that shutting down Tkachuk would help you quite a bit against Florida. You can make the argument that shutting down Eichel would help against Vegas, but the reality is both of these teams have depth that can hurt you as well. There is no one player you can take out. Now, from a Vegas standpoint, first off, they only lost 3 games on their way to the Stanley Cup final in 2018 before the Washington Capitals stopped them. The original misfits that are currently on their roster, you have William Karlsson, you have Jonathan Marchessault, you have Riley Smith, you have Shea Theodore, you have Braden McNabb, Will Carrier, and Zach Whitecloud played 1 regular season game that expansion year, so I put his name on the board, but he didn't play in the playoffs or have any role in that run to the Stanley Cup final. So yes, they're 2 Southern teams. Honestly, I would love to see Florida win this, but it would be great for Vegas as well. We're of course going to Vegas in August, so if there was a bunch of Stanley Cup winner swag for me to pick up while I was down there, I would definitely be quite happy to do so. Although if Florida wins, I'll probably order some Florida Stanley Cup winning merchandise as well, because you never know when you're going to be back again. And that's something that really both coaches have to drive home. Both Paul Maurice and Bruce Cassidy in their first years behind the bench. Cassidy proving, I didn't understand why Boston fired Cassidy at the time. I loved the job Jim Montgomery did. But yeah, Cassidy taking a team to the final does not surprise me. Maurice does. Paul Maurice has really proven that he is an excellent coach and proven any of his critics wrong. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. So while I may not have a team that I technically cheer for, at least one of the top teams I cheer for in this series, I'm anticipating a lot of wide open transition game. Watch turnovers. Both of these teams force turnovers at a ridiculous rate. I don't think the NHL counts it very accurately, or what they qualify as a turnover or a giveaway. It must be a much more stringent way of looking at things than for most of the rest of us. But this should be a lot of fun. And so for anybody who's saying, I'm not going to watch, I don't really care, I think you're going to miss out. I think these are going to be some fun games between 2 teams that obviously, don't see each other a lot, but I would expect the dislike to ramp up quickly. I figure Matthew Tkachuk within the first 5 minutes bumps into Hill, and everything gets started right there. And we'll probably see some dislike quite quickly in this, as Florida will try to knock Vegas off their game. For Florida, it's really important that they go in and they win the first game in Vegas. For Vegas, it's important to assert themselves at home. Florida's been excellent on the road in these playoffs, so Vegas needs to assert themselves at home, win those home games, and then go to Florida, where Florida hasn't been as impressive, and get the road wins. Vegas has been very good on the road as well. In terms of losses, two of the losses for Vegas on the road, three of them at home. For the Florida Panthers, three of their four losses have been at home. So we'll see what happens in this one. Let me know who you think wins this in the comment section below. Are you excited about this? Are you not? Let me know why. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for your support along the way. I will talk to you again soon.